The lanterns strung across our backyard flickered like they were celebrating someone I didn't recognize. Laughter spilled over the grass, glasses clinked, and camera flashes sparkled like tiny fireworks, every burst meant for my cousin, Liana. I stood near the edge of the crowd, close enough to feel the heat of the moment, yet far enough that no one noticed my presence. It was supposed to be my day too. My 19th birthday. Not a milestone to the world, but still a marker of something, if only anyone around me cared enough to remember. But they didn't. The evening had been planned entirely around Liana returning from her inspirational trip abroad, as my mother kept calling it. The decorations glowed soft gold, matching the shimmer on Liana's dress. Even the cake, a 3-tiered marble blue centerpiece, had her name piped across the top in cursive letters. There wasn't a second cake. Not even a cupcake. I had helped set up this entire place, the lanterns, the tables, the candles lined perfectly in straight rows. My mother had handed me a box of matches earlier and said, "Make sure everything is perfect before people arrive." She didn't say happy birthday. As the host tapped the microphone, a hush fell over the yard. For a moment, I let myself imagine he might acknowledge me too. Maybe even say something small. Something kind. But then he beamed at Liana and declared, "Let's welcome home our star." The crowd erupted. I stood still, letting the noise wash past me like a cold wave. Liana stepped forward, soaking in the cheers, flipping her hair the way she always did when she knew all eyes were on her. She blew kisses, struck poses for photos, and thanked everyone for coming. No one looked my way, not even once. I tightened my grip on the glass I was holding until I felt the chill seep into my fingers. My father walked by, clapping enthusiastically. He glanced in my direction, but his eyes slid past me like I was a shadow. My mother gently tugged my elbow and whispered, "Don't crowd her moment. Today is about Liana. Today. My birthday. My forgotten birthday." Something inside me shifted, not anger, not sadness. Just clarity. The kind that arrives like a quiet knock you can't ignore. I set my glass down. And in that moment, a decision formed, soft but firm. This night wouldn't be another wound I swallowed. It would be the last time I stood invisible in a family that never learned how to see me. And what happened next changed everything. Before we continue, tell me where you're listening from and what your name is in the comments. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Because the moment I stepped away from that party, a chain of events began, events no one in my family could ever undo. I walked away from the echo of applause like someone slipping out of their own skin. The party lights behind me blurred into soft halos, glowing against the night sky, but none of that warmth reached me. The air outside the backyard fence felt cooler, sharper, as if the world beyond my family's celebration lived by different rules. Ones I might finally belong to. My heels clicked against the pavement as I reached the end of the street. I paused, partly out of habit, listening for someone to call out my name. A "Where are you going?" or even a "Come back," we didn't mean it. Something. Anything. Nothing came. Only the muffled chorus of laughter drifting behind me, fading as though even the sound didn't notice my absence. I kept walking. The neighborhood was quiet, porch lights glowing, sprinklers hissing in yards, the faint hum of a car somewhere in the distance. Each step felt lighter than the last, like I was peeling myself away from years of being the extra person in my own life. There's a strange kind of freedom in realizing nobody is watching. For the first time that night, I breathed in fully, the air cool against the back of my throat. At the end of the block, a small bus stop stood under a flickering street lamp. I sat down, not entirely sure why. I had no plan, no destination, just the certainty that going back wasn't an option anymore. The metal bench chilled my legs through my dress, grounding me in a way my home never had. A stray page from someone's newspaper rolled across the pavement, catching on my foot. I picked it up absently. The headline was about a local art exhibit opening downtown, photos of hand-drawn architectural pieces, sketches of rooms full of light and meaning. Rooms that felt possible. I folded the newspaper and set it aside, but the images stayed in my mind. The bus approached, its headlights carving a path through the dark. The engine rumbled low, steady, patient, almost inviting. I stood, hesitated for a moment, then stepped on. The driver glanced at my dress, then at my bare shoulders, but said nothing. Maybe he recognized that look in my eyes, the look of someone leaving something behind because staying would cost too much. I took a seat near the back, where the lights were dimmer. The bus pulled away, and the streetlight's glow slid off the windows like melting gold. I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I wasn't following anyone. I wasn't supporting someone else's spotlight. I was simply moving. And that small movement felt like the beginning of a life I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. But what I didn't know then was that this midnight bus ride wouldn't just carry me away, it would carry me towards something. Someone. A path I never expected. Because the next stop wasn't just a place on the map, it was where my entire future quietly began waiting for me. The bus rattled along the dark highway, its interior humming with the soft vibration of the engine. Only 3 other passengers sat scattered across the seats, an older man asleep against the window, a young woman scrolling through her phone, and a teenager with headphones too large for his head. No one looked at me. No one needed anything from me. The anonymity felt like a warm blanket. Streetlights rushed past in rhythmic flashes. With each one, my reflection shifted in the window, sometimes clear, sometimes broken into pieces. Maybe that was fitting. Pieces were all I felt I had left. I reached into my small purse and pulled out the one thing that still felt like mine, my sketchbook. Its corners were soft from years of handling, its pages uneven, some smudged, some bent. I flipped through it slowly, letting the memories brush past me. Rooms I'd drawn as a child, corners of imagined homes, unfinished hallways, staircases leading nowhere. Designs from a life I had always hoped for, even when I didn't believe I could ever build it. My finger paused on one sketch, a small studio apartment I'd imagined long before I'd ever seen one. Tall windows. Soft morning light. A single wooden table. Peace. I traced the pencil lines, realizing how deeply I'd always craved my own space. Not large. Not luxurious. Just mine. The bus slowed as we entered the downtown district. Neon signs flickered against glass storefronts, and the sidewalks buzzed with small pockets of people leaving late-night diners and bars. A banner stretched across a gallery window caught my eye. Local Emerging Artists Showcase, Opening Week. The same exhibit from the newspaper page. Coincidence or something nudging me forward, I didn't know. But the sign gripped me with a certainty I didn't question. At the next stop, I stood up. When the bus doors hissed open, warm city air spilled in, tinged with coffee, rain on concrete, and distant music. I stepped out, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with anticipation. The bus pulled away behind me, its taillights shrinking into the night. The gallery was still lit despite the late hour. Through the glass, I saw displays of architectural sketches pinned up on white walls, lines so clean and confident they made my chest ache, not with envy, but with recognition. This was the world I had always imagined living in. Creating in. I pressed my hand to the window. My reflection stared back at me, tired, makeup smudged, hair falling loose, but something in my eyes looked awake for the first time in years. A soft voice behind me said, "It's closed, but it opens again at 10 tomorrow if you're interested." I turned. A woman stood there, tall, steady, with an expression that saw more than I was used to letting people notice. I didn't know her name yet. I didn't know who she would become. But meeting her wasn't an accident. Not even close. Because the woman I met outside that gallery wasn't just a stranger, she would become the first person to truly see me. The woman's presence carried a calmness that cut through the midnight noise of the city. She wasn't dressed like someone heading home from a bar or rushing to catch a train. Instead, she wore a simple linen coat, a leather bag slung over her shoulder, and an expression that felt observant. As if she didn't just look at things, she studied them. I'm sorry, I said, suddenly aware of how I must look in my wrinkled dress and tired eyes. I didn't mean to stare into the window like a lost tourist. You didn't look lost, she replied gently. You looked like someone searching for something. Her words landed too precisely, like she had read the last few pages of my life. She extended a hand. I'm Mara. Her grip was steady, warm, grounding. I hesitated only a second before giving her my name in return. It felt strange saying it, like I was hearing myself from a distance. Mara nodded toward the gallery window. You like architecture? I admitted. Mostly rooms. Spaces. Imagined places. I've never studied formally. I expected her to offer the kind of polite smile people give before stepping away. But she didn't. Instead, she tilted her head the way people do when they actually care. Do you have your sketches with you? The question startled me. No one had ever asked to see my work, not seriously anyway. I hesitated, instinctively pulling my bag closer. Mara must have sensed it. Only if you're comfortable, she added. Something in her tone disarmed me. It wasn't pushy, but it wasn't pity either. It was curiosity, real, genuine curiosity. I opened my sketchbook and flipped to a few pages. She didn't rush. She examined each drawing with a focus that made my throat tighten. Her eyes moved along the pencil lines, studying the shadows, the angles, the imagined ceilings. You have an eye for emotional geometry, she said after a long moment. I blinked. For what? For the feeling a room is supposed to give you. Most people draw objects. You draw atmosphere. No one had ever described my work like that. Not even close. The city noise faded for a moment. It was just me, my sketchbook, and a stranger who saw parts of me I'd spent years shrinking. She pointed at one sketch, the studio with tall windows and morning light. Do you know why you draw this space again and again? I swallowed. Because it feels like a place where I can breathe. Her eyes softened. Maybe that's the space you're meant to build in real life. The words hit harder than she knew. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out a card, and held it out to me. If you're ever ready to explore this seriously, she said, come to this address. I might have an opportunity for you. A lifeline, offered by fate in a linen coat. Because when I walked into the address on that card the next morning, I had no idea my entire future was waiting on the other side of that door. The next morning, the city felt different, less daunting, more inviting, as if the streets themselves were nudging me forward. I still wore the same dress from the night before, now layered under an old denim jacket I'd found stuffed at the bottom of my duffel bag. My hair was tied back, my eyes puffy from lack of sleep, but something in my chest had shifted. I wasn't walking away from something anymore. I was walking toward something. Mara's card rested between my fingers, edges soft from how many times I'd turned it over. The address led me to a converted warehouse tucked between an auto repair shop and a flower market. Tall windows ran across the upper floor, sunlight pouring through them like liquid gold. The sound of distant drills, soft conversations, and clattering tools spilled into the street. I paused at the entrance. My heart thudded hard enough to rattle my ribs. Inside, the building smelled of sawdust, fresh paint, and warm metal. Long wooden tables were scattered with blueprints, fabric samples, and small-scale models of rooms. People moved with purpose, measuring, cutting, sketching, discussing. It felt alive. Like a world that breathed in creativity and exhaled possibility. Mara stood near the back, reviewing a large sketch taped to a wall. When she spotted me, she offered a small but genuine smile. You came. I wasn't sure I should. Most people who shouldn't, she said, are exactly the ones who need to. She motioned for me to follow her into a quieter corner of the studio, a space lined with shelving units filled with design books and materials labeled with careful handwriting. I looked over your sketches again last night, she said. You have raw instinct. That's something you can't teach. I tried to hide how much those words meant. But I've never studied. I have no degree, no training, no. Mara lifted her hand gently. None of that disqualifies you. What matters is whether you're willing to learn. She opened a drawer and pulled out a small portfolio binder. Inside were tasks, practice exercises, spatial design challenges, shading assignments, all labeled with dates. I have an open assistant position, she said. It's unpaid at first, but you'd work alongside our team. Observe. Practice. Build. If you're serious, this is where you start. The room suddenly felt too still. Unpaid meant unstable. Unpaid meant risk. Unpaid meant stepping into a world where failure was a very real possibility. But what did I have to return to? A house where my existence was an afterthought? I looked down at the binder. The pages felt heavy in my hands. Heavy with potential. I'll do it, I said, the words coming out steadier than I felt. Mara nodded once, almost like she had expected nothing less. Good, she said. Then your life is about to change faster than you think. Because the first day in that studio didn't just challenge me, it revealed a truth I had spent my whole life avoiding. My first day in the studio felt like stepping into a world I had watched from the outside for years. Everything buzzed, saws cutting through reclaimed wood, pencils dragging across drafting paper, the software of 3D printers forming miniature walls layer by layer. People worked with a kind of focused energy I had only dreamed of being part of. Mara introduced me briefly to the team, though no one paused what they were doing. They gave polite nods before returning to their measurements, sketches, and construction tasks. It wasn't coldness, it was immersion. They were all exactly where they wanted to be. She handed me a small notebook. Sketch everything you see, she said. Not the objects, capture the space. The way the room breathes. That sentence stayed with me all morning. As I walked through the studio, I observed the way light spilled across a drafting table, how shadows softened the corners of a scale model, how people instinctively avoided blocking the sunlight when reviewing blueprints. The space felt alive in a way my childhood home never had. Nothing here was about perfection. Everything was about intention. At noon, the team gathered around a long wooden table for lunch. I stayed back, unsure if I should join. Old habits, lingering at edges, staying unnoticed, pulled at my ankles like familiar weights. Mara spotted my hesitation and gestured for me to sit. You're part of the room now, she said quietly. I sat. For the first few minutes, I listened more than I spoke, another old habit, but this time, it felt different. People here weren't talking about impressing anyone. They weren't comparing achievements or spotlighting themselves. They discussed light fixtures, fabric textures, the way certain woods carried warmth better than others. It felt like a language I had always understood but never heard spoken aloud. After lunch, Mara led me to a workstation near a tall window. This is yours, she said. Mine. A word that pressed against my chest with an unfamiliar weight. The table held only the basics, pencils, rulers, markers, and a stack of blank paper, but it felt like an entire world. My world. Start with a simple prompt, Mara said. Draw a place where you felt safe. Safe. The word echoed through my mind like a foreign sound. I pressed the pencil to the page, hand trembling. But nothing came. Minutes passed. Then more. And more. Frustration tightened my throat. I had spent years sketching imaginary spaces, yet when asked to draw one from my life, my hand froze. Because the truth was simple and heavy. I didn't have a real memory of safety. Not one that felt solid enough to draw. When Mara returned, she didn't scold me. She simply glanced at the blank page, nodded slowly, and said, then draw the place where you wish you had been safe. Her voice cut through something deep inside me. For the first time, I wasn't sketching to escape. I was sketching to confront. Because what I drew that day didn't just reveal who I was, it revealed a wound I didn't realize was still open. I stared at the blank page for what felt like hours. Mara's words echoed softly in my mind, draw the place where you wish you had been safe. It felt simple. But it wasn't. It was like trying to draw a memory that never existed. So I closed my eyes. And slowly, something began to form, not a room I had ever lived in, but a room I had always longed for. Tall windows like the ones in the gallery, letting in a gentle morning glow. A soft rug in muted colors, the kind that cushions bare feet. A desk by the window, not cluttered with someone else's things, but open, waiting. A chair angled slightly toward the light, as if inviting me to rest. Not perfection. Just peace. When I opened my eyes, my hand moved almost without my permission. Lines appeared. Corners softened. Light emerged. Shadows whispered. The room took shape on the paper as though it had been waiting years to exist. By the time I lifted my pencil, the page was no longer blank. It was honest. I didn't hear Mara walk up. But I felt her presence settle beside me. She studied the drawing quietly, her eyes tracing each line. I braced myself for critique, for something that would confirm I didn't belong here. But she only said, "You draw like someone who has lived in the absence of warmth." The word struck something deep, a place I had always covered with silence. My throat tightened. "Is that bad?" "It's real," she replied. "Real is more powerful than perfect." I looked at the sketch again. This room wasn't flashy or dramatic. It wasn't designed to impress. It simply existed the way I had always wished I could exist, without needing permission. Mara placed a gentle hand on the back of my chair. "There is a quiet strength in your work," she said. "You build spaces that comfort. Spaces that heal. That is not something everyone can do." Her words felt like the first validation I had received in years, maybe ever. And for a moment, I let myself believe them. Over the next few weeks, the studio became a second skin. I swept floors, organized tools, soaked up conversations like sunlight. I learned the difference between structural balance and emotional balance. I practiced shading until my fingers cramped. I studied how Mara and the others shaped spaces not just with materials, but with intention. Every day, I felt myself growing, not louder, but steadier. Still, something lingered in the background. A quiet ache I tried to ignore. I hadn't spoken to my family since the night I left. No calls. No messages. No apologies. Just silence. It was freedom. But it was also a wound. And that wound was about to be touched in a way I didn't see coming. Because the moment my work finally reached the world, someone from my past saw it, and everything I thought I'd left behind came crashing back. Weeks turned into months, and my life began shaping itself in ways I hadn't believed were possible. I wasn't just assisting anymore, I was contributing. Mara started trusting me with small-scale concepts, then full-room mock-ups. My sketches evolved into designs, and my designs slowly found their way into real spaces. Then one afternoon, everything changed. Mara called me upstairs to the loft office, her expression unreadable. "Your project," she said, tapping on her laptop screen, "the Serenity Studio, the one with the tall windows and quiet light, it's been selected for a feature in a local design journal." My breath caught. "What? Why mine?" "Because," she said simply, "it resonates. When art comes from truth, people feel it before they understand it." I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or sit down. My hands trembled in a way they hadn't since the night I walked away from home. She forwarded the article draft to my email, and I read it twice, once with disbelief, once with awe. Seeing my name in print felt surreal, like reclaiming a voice I had been forced to silence for years. The article went live a week later. Then everything happened at once. Messages flooded in, strangers, small creators, even a few local businesses curious about consultations. My sketchbook became my lifeline, filling with ideas faster than I could draw them. It felt like the world had tilted just enough to let me step into a space that finally belonged to me. But not all messages were from strangers. One night, after a long day at the studio, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't saved but could never forget. My stomach tightened. It was my mother. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted closure. And another part, the part that had walked out of that backyard, wanted nothing at all from them. I finally opened the message. We saw the article. Liana is saying people think your story is about her. She's very upset. This is all getting complicated. Maybe you should reach out. No congratulations. No pride. No we miss you. Just another request to protect the one person they had always chosen over me. I read the message 3 times. Each time, it said the same thing. They still didn't see me. Not really. I didn't reply. Instead, I closed my phone and walked to the center of the studio, where my nearly finished installation piece rested, a minimalist room of glowing glass and soft light. A room that felt like healing in physical form. As I stared at it, something inside me finally settled. I wasn't the forgotten girl from the backyard anymore. I wasn't the shadow behind someone else's spotlight. I wasn't invisible. I had built a life where my voice shaped spaces. Where my silence became strength. Where my past no longer dictated my future. And for the first time, I understood that moving forward didn't require forgiveness, or reconciliation, or even a response. It only required choosing myself. Because sometimes the greatest justice isn't revenge. It's becoming someone they can no longer ignore.